The Watchman program. Evangelist and commentator Peter Salemi, bringing you the truth about today's world news in the light of Bible prophecy.
Hi, Peter Salemi. Now that the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem will be opened in May, and Donald Trump recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, there have been calls for the building of a third temple in Jerusalem. Now that Donald Trump took Jerusalem off the negotiation table when it comes to negotiating peace with the Palestinians, and the Jewish government and the religious Jews in Jerusalem know full well that they got the full backing of the United States government, the U.S. evangelical community, as well as the evangelical community in Canada and other parts of the Western world, and the Jews as well, some of the Jews that are scattered around the world, knowing that they got these people backing them. Well, there's nothing to stop the Israelis from building a third temple. But there is an obstacle, however. And of course, that obstacle is the Temple Mount, the Dome of the Rock, and the mosque to the south of the Dome of the Rock. Jews are wondering and Christians are wondering how can that temple be built while the Muslims occupy the Temple Mount. However, with new archaeological findings and people really looking into history and the Bible, looking into the biblical texts, and actually going around Jerusalem, looking at the old sites, and documentaries have now come out, at least 2 or 3 of them have come out, showing that the temple never really stood on the Temple Mount. That when Solomon and when they rebuilt it in the time of Ezra and Nehemiah and so on, they found that the Temple Mount was not the original site of the Temple of Solomon and Ezra and Zerubbabel and so on. That the site was actually somewhere else, and that the belief that the temple stood on the Temple Mount is all based on tradition and medieval tradition, and tradition is very, very strong. People don't like to depart from tradition. And, people get all upset when you even think about another site for the temple. But as people say today, facts really don't care about your feelings. And it's up to people to accept the facts and leave tradition aside and just deal with the facts. And the facts are, as we will go into in this program, the facts are that the temple of God did not sit on the Temple Mount. That it was actually south of that on the hill called Ophel. And there are scriptures in the Bible that show that the temple was actually south of Mount Moriah on the hill called Ophel, and that the temple was in the city of David. When you look at Old Testament scriptures, you see that the city of David and Zion and the temple all mean pretty much the same thing, that the temple stood in the city of David, and it actually says it sat to the north in the city of David. And it was, of course, on the hill called Ophel, the threshing floor of Onan, and there is no evidence of a threshing floor on the Temple Mount. A threshing floor is a flat surface, and there is no flat surface on the Temple Mount. Those walls that are around the Temple Mount were served as retaining walls, and it was built up that platform. There is no flat platform. If you strip it all down, there is no flat platform on the Temple Mount. But Ophel, when you look at topological graphs, you see that the hill of Ophel is flat and was used as a threshing floor. And in the book of Psalms, it says that it was to the north, in the city of David, to the north. And that is the hill called Ophel. Now, before I get into more of this, I want to offer you this free booklet that I just completed, The Coming Third Temple in Jerusalem. that you could download free of charge off our website, britishisrael.ca, another booklet, Jerusalem in Prophecy, and a third booklet called The Little Horn, Hitler, and the Coming Beast of Prophecy that you can download off our website free of charge, britishisrael.ca. And of course, we will put the links underneath the YouTube player, and you can download them directly from there. Take a look at this, and I'll be right back.
To download your free literature, log onto our website at www.britishisrael.ca. If you want to write, call, or text for more information, our address is the British Israel Church of God, P.O. Box 30043, Brooklyn Town Center, Whitby, Ontario, Canada. Postal code is L1MOB5. Our USA address is 171 West Barbara Avenue, Pahrump, Nevada, USA. Postal code 89060. If you want to reach us by telephone, call or text at 905-447-4415 or 416-898-7407.
So what originally stood on the Temple Mount before the Muslims took it over in the 7th century AD? Well, if you look at the shape of the Temple Mount, you will see that it exactly resembles other Roman forts that you find in Masada, you find up in Germany, in Britain, and other places. It is formed exactly like the old Roman forts. And you will see that when you look into the book of Josephus, you find that the Temple Mount today was actually the old fort called Antonia, where the Romans occupied the high ground. And of course, all the armies would occupy the high ground when they were occupying a foreign power. So they were occupying the high ground, and Josephus describes Fort Antonia, and he says that it was the size of several cities, and it held the 10th Roman Legion. Now, a Roman legion consists of about 6,000 soldiers, not to mention all its servants and helpers, and it numbered up to about 10,000 people. Now, when you look at the model that they have in Jerusalem, you have the temple, and then you have this little appendage, and they say that that is Fort Antonia, and that little appendage can hold maybe, 600 soldiers? But a Roman legion and all its servants was about 10,000 people. And that 35-acre Temple Mount there can hold 10,000 people. And Josephus says it was the size of several cities. So that was Fort Antonia. And of course, to the south of that, Josephus writes that there were two colonnades from the south part of Fort Antonia, 600 feet with these two colonnades, and then came the temple. So the temple was 600 feet south of Fort Antonia, and of course that is the hill called Ophel, and the temple faced the east. The back of it was the west, and the temple and the Holy of Holies faced the east. And from the Mount of Olives, you could actually look right into the temple. And Fort Antonia had 4 towers on each corner, but the southeast tower the other 3 were 50 cubits, but the southeast tower was 70 cubits, a bit higher, so it could look right into the temple. So what we see on the Dome of the Rock is actually the old Fort Antonia. Now, when the Romans destroyed Jerusalem, the ancient historians say that the only thing that was left was Fort Antonia. That was the only thing that was standing. And what do we find in Jerusalem? The only ancient monument in Jesus' day. What do we find? The Temple Mount. It was the only thing left from the destruction of Jerusalem. Now, Jesus Christ said in Matthew, the 24th chapter, when he said to his disciples, he says in verse 1 of Matthew 24, Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him to show him the buildings of the temple. Jesus said, "See you not all these things. Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. And when you look at Josephus, I mean, the Roman soldiers came in and just destroyed the temple from its very foundations. And what do we find on Ophel? It is barren. Not one stone is left upon another. Many people think that Jesus' prophecy was wrong because we see the retaining walls around the Temple Mount, the Wailing Wall. Many people feel that that was part of Herod's when he expanded the temple, that was part of Herod's temple. But again, that's Fort Antonia, and Jesus was not wrong. And there's also a prophecy in the book of Micah that says that Jerusalem shall be plowed as a field. And that's exactly what happened. And we see not one stone left upon another in the hill called Ophel. Jesus' prophecy rings true, and it was fulfilled by Titus in 70 AD. And of course, that prophecy of Daniel, the 9th chapter, verse 27, was talking about Titus destroying the temple, and not one stone was left atop another that was not thrown down, and Jesus' prophecy was accurate. Now, also, when we find out where the temple actually stood, we could also find exactly where the crucifixion site was as well. Jesus Christ of Nazareth, when he died in Matthew the 27th chapter, it says in verse 54 that the centurion, when they watched Jesus, they saw the earthquake, and all these things that were done feared greatly, saying, this truly was the Son of God. They saw all these things happen, of the graves splitting open and bodies coming out of the graves, verse 52 and 53. And verse 51, it says, the veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom, and the earth did quake, and the rocks were rent. So the centurion, where Jesus was crucified, the centurion can look right into the temple and see the temple be split, the temple veil be split in two from top to bottom. So the temple faced east, and from the Mount of Olives, you could look right into the temple. So that this shows that Jesus Christ of Nazareth was crucified on the Mount of Olives, and not on the other places like the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, Gordon's Calvary, which lie on the west of Jerusalem, on the west side, and on the north side. And when you look at the biblical text, you see that the temple faced east, and you can look right into the temple from the Mount of Olives. So this shows that the crucifixion site took place on the Mount of Olives. We also see in Hebrews, the 13th chapter, it compares the sacrifice of the red heifer to the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. And it talks about the red heifer being sacrificed outside of the camp, and it talks about Jesus' suffering that took place outside of the gate. And so the Apostle Paul is saying here that Jesus' crucifixion took place near the altar of the red heifer. And the altar of the red heifer was on the Mount of Olives, at the summit of the Mount of Olives. And so Jesus Christ was crucified on the Mount of Olives. Another clue, it says that Jesus was crucified in the place of the skull. Now, a lot of people think that at Gordon's Calvary there, you see a shape of a skull in the escarpment there, and many people think, well, that's where Jesus was crucified, in the place of the skull. But the meaning of the place of the skull wasn't speaking of dead men's skulls. It meant living skulls. And 9 times we find in the Old Testament that word was used for taking polls. So the place of the skull was the east gate on the Mount of Olives, where they counted skulls. It was a polling place that they would count people in, especially on the feast days, especially on the Passover and other feast days. They would count skulls before you would enter into Jerusalem. It was a safety precaution that the Romans practiced. And you would check in before you would enter Jerusalem. And, people do that today when it comes to terrorism. We got safety checkpoints, and they do it in Jerusalem. They do it now here in the airports and so on. They would count skulls, and that took place on the Mount of Olives before you entered into the east gate. So Jesus Christ of Nazareth was plainly crucified on the Mount of Olives. And another indication is here it says the graves were opened because of the earthquake. And we find old pictures that they have dug out of the archives that we're showing you on the screen here now, that there are evidence of earthquakes, and there are tombs that are split on the Mount of Olives. Photographs don't lie. There it is. So the crucifixion took place on the Mount of Olives. Now also, the Romans always, when they seized a criminal, as they seized Christ, the place where they seized the criminal is usually the place where they would crucify the criminal, and they use that as a deterrent. And of course, where was Jesus Christ seized? On the Mount of Olives. So clearly, when you understand where the temple is and where it was situated and what it faced, and you look at these scriptures, you will find where the actual crucifixion site of Jesus Christ actually occurred. Now, before I get into some of the prophecies about the Temple Mount, again, I want you to download this booklet, The Coming Third Temple in Jerusalem, Jerusalem in Prophecy, and the Little Horn, Hitler, and the Beast of Prophecy. Free of charge, off our website, britishisrael.ca. Take a look at this, and I'll be right back.
I said, well, guilty.
Download your free booklet, Is There Really a Hellfire? At britishisrael.ca, or call or text for a free hard copy at 905-447-4415 or 416-898-7407.
The Great Tribulation is the time of Jacob's trouble, Jeremiah 30, verse 5 and 7. It is a time when all of Israel, all 12 tribes, are going to collapse, and they are going to be taken over by foreign powers. And this Great Tribulation is going to start in Jerusalem. Jerusalem is the powder keg that's going to explode, and that fire, as the book of Ezekiel says, will go unto all the house of Israel. So Jerusalem is the powder keg. Now, the temple is going to be that spark that's going to ignite it. And of course, that will ignite the Great Tribulation. Notice what Jesus says in Matthew, the 24th chapter, and verse 15. He says, "When you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place." And of course, that holy place is the temple. He is talking about a physical temple. He's talking about the physical city of Jerusalem. And if he's talking about the physical city of Jerusalem, why not a physical temple? So he's talking about the physical temple, stand in the holy place. Whoso readeth, let him understand. So Jesus is quoting the book of Daniel that we find in Daniel, the 12th chapter. And it says in verse 11, it says, "And from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away." Notice we see the daily sacrifices taking place here in Jerusalem. To do that, there must be a temple. Now, it could be a temporary tabernacle before they build the actual temple, or the temple itself, but there will be something on the original site where the temple stood, and sacrifices are going to be taking place. We're just going to have to wait and see. It says, shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up shall be 1,290 days. So there's going to be the sacrifices, and after 30 days the sacrifices will be stopped, and then will come the Great Tribulation of 1,260 days, a 3.5-year period called the Great Tribulation. Now, Jesus and Daniel says that there's going to be an abomination that's going to be set up in the holy place. Now, what is an abomination? Well, an abomination is something that God finds, that God hates in his sight, and it usually has to do with idolatry. Now, this abomination that was set up in the holy place, of course, was fulfilled in type by Antiochus Epiphanes, that we find in Daniel, the 11th chapter, verse 31 rather. Daniel, the 11th chapter, verse 31. And it says here, it says, and arms shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate. Now that was fulfilled in type by Antiochus Epiphanes, who set up idolatry in the temple of God and sacrifice a pig on God's altar, and of course that made Jerusalem desolate. But if you notice, this is a dual prophecy. In Daniel, the 8th chapter, it speaks of the same event that took place by Antiochus Epiphanes. In verse 12, it says, and the host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. And then a little later on, it says here, it says, I heard one saint speaking to another saint, and said unto the certain saint which spake, how long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then the sanctuary shall be cleansed. That was fulfilled in Antiochus Epiphanes' day. But notice verse 17, and it talks about this same vision. It says, O son of man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. So what Antiochus did in Jerusalem at that time was only a type of what is going to happen in the end time. And Jesus Christ confirms it in Matthew 24 when it talks about the abomination of desolation, something that God hates. Usually idol worship, idol practice is going to be set up in the temple of God, and that is going to cause the great tribulation from it. Now, in 2 Thessalonians, the 2nd chapter, here we see what this abomination is going to be. Here it talks about a falling away that's going to take place in the church of God, and it says, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. It says, that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first. That first century church fell away after the disciples, all the disciples died. It fell away into Roman idolatry, and it picked up a lot of festivals, a lot of practices from the ancient pagans, and incorporated into the church, and it fell away from the truth. And it says, there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed. The end result of the falling away of the first century church is the Roman Catholic Church today. And who's the head of the Roman Catholic Church? The Pope in Rome. And that Pope in Rome is the man of sin that is to be revealed out of this falling away that took place. The son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped. And who comes to the Pope when it comes to religious matters? All other religions come to the Pope and discuss religious matters with the Pope. The Pope heads all religions, and he wants to make a huge alliance with Islam, and he wants to reconcile with the Greek Orthodox churches and make the Pope head of it all. So he oppose and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshiped, so that he as God sits in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. There you have it, the abomination that makes desolate. This little horn. Now, when you read the booklet, The Little Horn, Hitler and the Beast of Prophecy, we show you that the little horn of Daniel the 8th chapter is not the little horn of Daniel the 7th chapter. The little horn of Daniel the 7th chapter is the Pope in Rome, and it stays a little horn. But you read in Daniel the 8th chapter that this little horn, in verse 9, it says, the little horn which waxed exceedingly great. So this little horn starts as a little horn, but then grows and becomes very, very powerful. And this little horn we have identified as the coming beast of prophecy. And this beast, this political leader who heads a 10-nation combine, possibly called the United States of Europe, is going to be a church-state government. And this little horn that grows great is going to set up the Pope in Rome to settle all the religious problems, to homogenize and amalgamate all the religions of the world, and he's going to be the head of it all, as it says that he exalts himself above all that is called God, and that is worship, and that he, as God, sits in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God, the vicar of Christ. And the vicar of Christ means that he represents Christ on earth. And you can't get more abominable than that. Setting himself up in the temple of God, saying he is the vicar of Christ. That is the abomination that makes desolate. Get this free booklet. The Coming Third Temple in Jerusalem, Jerusalem in Prophecy, and The Little Horn, Hitler, and the Beast of Prophecy. Free of charge, off our website, britishisrael.ca. This is Peter Salemi saying goodbye, friends, and I'll see you here next time on the Watchman program.